Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here back at NDC London. Who is here for the first time? Oh, that's a good number. Okay, cool, very good. And all the rest of the people, you know what to expect from the whole day, right? 2 days, so that's going to be amazing. Now, this is not typically what I typically talk about. I was just talking with this gentleman right here in the front, and he was like, "You're not going to talk about Maui?" I'm like, "No. Everything is AI now, so I'm going to talk about that. I work at Microsoft. I have to." No, I'm kidding. Okay, we need to warm up. Okay, it's still early in the day. Okay, we'll get there. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. And to make it worse, I was preparing the final bits yesterday evening. I'm in the Netherlands, so I got here late. I was like, I'm going to do the full workday thing, hop on a plane, get here. I need to drive further to the airport from my home than the actual flight time is. Like, I need to drive 2 hours to the airport for a 45-minute flight. I need to check that next time. But to make it worse, I was preparing my demos and my things, and I was like, my Windows machine is a little bit sluggish. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to restart it. It never came back up. Luckily, I'm somewhat of a professional, and I have 2 machines, so I'm going to demo everything on a Mac today. I'm sorry, with VS Code. I was planning to do this absolutely with Visual Studio on Windows, but it looks more or less the same, so it's going to be fine. Who here is on Visual Studio Code? Okay. Visual Studio? Oh, most of you. Okay. JetBrains writer? All right. Cool. Gotcha. Yeah, I spotted you. Cool. So hopefully I got everything set up right, but I'm a professional. If I just shouldn't have told you, but I'm an honest guy. So you know, you're never going to notice. I'm Gerald Versluis, in an English-speaking name. No one ever gets that right, so don't worry about it. I'm a software engineer on the .NET team, specifically on .NET Maui, and I typically work remotely from the Netherlands. Now, I don't know how much you know about how speakers get up on a stage here, besides the stairs there. Yeah, that's the level you're going to get here, okay? This is it. But we submit talks like months in advance, right? And in the AI space right now, that's like a lifetime, right? Like, new stuff is coming out literally every day. Like, I don't know who's working with GitHub Copilot CLI right now. You start it up, and it luckily has a self-updating mechanism now, right? It tells you like, hey, I downloaded the new version, exit and restart to get the latest version, because before I got into, like, I installed it through winget, like I downloaded the binary and I did another thing, and it was like I had 3 versions going on. None of that anymore. But yeah, that's like a lifetime, right? So new stuff is coming out every day. I start up Visual Studio Code Insiders and it's like, boom, it looks differently. So I'm going to struggle a little bit to find where things are right now. That's just because things are changing so fast. Same thing with MCPs. Whenever I submitted this talk, MCPs were all the rage, as the young people would say. I'm trying. But yeah, now it's like, MCPs, they're there, it's nice, it's fine. But hopefully it will still be useful, right? And that's going to be part of the talk as well. Like, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, hey, is an MCP actually the thing you need? But at least you'll know how to do it, and maybe then you're like, okay, that's nice, I know how it works, and I'm never going to look at it again. So let's do a quick, all right. This machine gave up too. Thank you for coming. What? It's fine, it's fine. So let's have a quick look at how we got here, right? Because I think it was November, like 2022, when the first people, not normies, like non-technical people, were like, hey, look at this website. And it was like a chat interface, right? ChatGPT. And everyone was like, look at what this thing can do, right? Super amazing. And that's where it kind of like really took off, and especially in the software development space. Who is not using AI on a daily basis at this point? See, everyone. Well, this person right here, all right, I'm going to convince you, that's fine. And it all started with like the code completions, right? And that's kind of like what we do at Microsoft. We settle on one name, and then we name that everything, right? So I think that was kind of like the first GitHub Copilot, and we still name things GitHub Copilot, but now it means like 10 different things. And it started with kind of like that code completion, and you would start typing, and then boom, you got the whole block of code, right? And then we kind of like got the chat window also in VS Code and now also in Visual Studio. And you could be like, hey, what does this thing do, right? And you could just go back and forth with like, hey, getting to know this code base. Then we got agent mode, right, where you could also start editing files and do things more autonomously. And now we are like in the agentic phase where we can run things in CLIs, in the background, in the cloud, everywhere. Who installed Claude Bot? Anyone? Yeah. Oh, I need to talk to you. And you too. So I think it was renamed now. That was suddenly all the rage. Oh, I'm really trying. I'm trying too hard. Okay. It took X Twitter by storm and other social media suddenly with like, hey, this was a self-hosted kind of like instance running on Claude, I think, that can connect to WhatsApp and Signal and all the things, and you could just do messages and be like, hey, work on this thing. What about this thing? And it could run your whole life. Also a funny thing, which is kind of like the thing with AI and the theme with AI, there were also a lot of people who now published all of their keys and secrets and whatever to WhatsApp and accounts and whatever online. So there were a whole bunch of people who were like, hey, I can take over your account now, that's nice. So always be careful. And Ralph Loops, who already knows about Ralph Loops, is a phrase coined by, I think, name escapes me completely now. Jeffrey Huntley, who's like, hey, that's the character from The Simpsons. Well, it's a whole theory. Look it up. So that's kind of like where we are today. Does this work now? It does work. But it kind of like started really kicking off also for me with the agentic coding, right? With the agent mode at least. You could do all these things and it could work more autonomously, right? It could plan, it could execute, it could run terminal commands, it could do all of these things. But to do that effectively, it would also have to have access to the things I mentioned, right? The terminal, but then it kind of like stopped there. So how would it be if you could also have it invoke all kinds of tools, right? That it could go out to GitHub and create issues or pull requests, or go out to Azure and just publish your whole thing and create a new resource plan and whatnot, right? And can do all these things. So it could startly do all these things, but it missed a bunch of context, right? So that's kind of like where we ran into trouble. How do we provide then, namely real-time context? Because I'll show you that in a little bit if I remember. These models are trained because the LLMs are kind of like the foundation of this thing, right? We all know that. I assume a little bit of knowledge here. But they are trained up to a certain point. So if you go to a model right now, which is funny in the space that I work with, if you don't know what .NET MAUI is, it's the framework that lets you build cross-platform apps for iOS, Android, macOS, Windows, based on C# and .NET. And we'll be like, hey, there's this new API on iOS 26. You should look into that because I think we need to update it. And it will be like, you said iOS 26, but I'm going to look at iOS 18 because that's the latest version. You're trying to trick me. 26 is not a thing. And I'm like, yes it is. Yes, it is. Look it up online. It really is. And then it will go out and do some web search and be like, okay, I know what you mean. And that's the same with like .NET features, right? Like C# 14, every November, new stuff will come out and it will not know about it unless it's like trained on December 1st, right? So there's always kind of like a point in time thing, and then the other stuff, right? Like how do we connect it to our database to actually pull in data that we need or do all the things that I just mentioned? And we kind of like solve that with a bunch of tooling. We were like, okay, we're going to build all these things, but they all had custom integration. The LLM, the Copilot, needed to do that in several different ways, which is not really great because sometimes it would not understand. So how cool would it be if we would have a one way to kind of like do that? And with the agentic phase, we kind of like learned, hey, software development wasn't really about code, right? Is there someone else kind of like, or am I the only one, right? It was never about the code. It's all about how the user experiences it. Now, I'm not saying this so that you could go off and go vibe coding, right? Just let the AI run and don't care about anything. Like I already mentioned, like you have to care about security, you have to care about several things. But in the end, the only thing that's important is like, hey, is your user happy? Can they do whatever they want to do? Does it look nice? That helps for the user experience. And now, what I notice more and more, because we are using this a lot at Microsoft, and I'm not just saying that because we have to, right? Maybe you've seen the news, like we all have to when we're forced. On our team, at least, like Microsoft is a big company, I can speak for everyone. But on our team, we adopted it quite early. I was skeptical at first, I'll admit that. But as time progressed, as things got better, this makes us so much more efficient right now. If you set up a couple of things, MCP is definitely one of them, it can help you accelerate so much more. So I cannot get here up on a stage and say things that I don't really believe in, that I don't actually use. You'll have to believe me on my pretty blue eyes, right? I absolutely think this is it. And I notice about what I'm doing is that not so much like, hey, I don't even open the IDE anymore whenever I start working on a thing. I open a CLI now. And that's one thing. And the other thing is like, hey, I'm not thinking about, hey, how am I going to fix this thing? It's more like, how am I going to craft the prompt? How am I going to set up the context for this other person to work on it effectively, right? So it's never about the code, right? We're changing the way that we're kind of like doing all these things. And why it matters, well, I already kind of like got ahead of myself and talked about these things like, hey, they're only trained to a certain date. So this is exactly the thing that I mentioned, right? Like this is literally a screenshot of last night. So, you know, iOS 26 is out there. Where are my Apple fans? Hey, all Android? Ooh, okay. And models will hallucinate, right? Like whenever you're like, hey, at some point, like if you feed it with enough instructions, it will lose the context and it will start hallucinating things and make things up. And there's a bunch of more stuff that you can kind of like put in here. Cool. So to fix all that, I say we, I had nothing to do with it. It's actually not even Microsoft. We came up with a solution for that, which is model context protocol, right? So if you kind of like dissect that, and we have the model, which is the LLM model, right? It can be anything, can be Claude, can be GPT, can be Gemini, because this came out and everyone kind of like adopted it, right? This is not something that we try to be like, oh, this is our thing and we are going to make that pretty and nice working. We want this to work for all the models, right? So this is like open standard, open everything. You have the specification that's out there and it's got adopted by all the companies, right? The context, which is going to provide to the LLM model, right, can be tools, can be data, can be anything, and then the protocol, which is the contract, the thing, the unified thing that we kind of like agreed on that the systems will call so they know what to kind of like work with. And you can, this is actually something that Anthropic put on their website. It's like, hey, this is a USB-C port for AI applications, right? You can plug it in there and it provides a standardized way to connect devices, tools to LLMs and kind of like, you know, so that's kind of like a nice analogy. Model context protocol created by Anthropic, adopted by the AI community and evolving together. Now, I don't know about you. If I do talk to people all over the world. I'm not a native English speaker, so I'm probably not like, you know, perfect pronunciation and everything. It's fine, I'm not trying to make fun of anyone, but talking to people, especially who are even if they are native English speakers, it will be a lot like, oh yeah, Anthropic, you might know them from Cloud. It sounds a lot like cloud, right? Like the cloud. It's not, but it's not cloud. It's more like this one, right? Like Claude. So I'm always like, cloud application is like, anyway, that's where you know Anthropic from. Model context protocol. So you have a couple of ingredients there. We have the hosts, and to make it a little bit more confusing, a host can also be, well, a client can also be a host, kind of like, you know, the other way around. But hosts are typically like your IDE, right? Can be Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, can be JetBrains, can be Copilot CLI, and then you have the clients, right? So, and those are kind of like the things inside of it. So your Copilot chat window, inside of Windows, we're building all kinds of MCP things, maybe your cloud desktop application, right? All these things. And then you have the servers that provide all the context, right? So you have GitHub, you have Azure, you have Playwright, right? That's also super popular, but in my space, kind of like you have Appium for UI tests or Figma to get the actual designs. And there's like hundreds of thousands of them out there already. Again, like this was a couple of months ago, MCPs where like everyone was building it. Was it always the right solution? I don't know, but at least they're out there and they can do amazing, amazing things, right? And you can read the whole specification. Like this one is from November. I think there's a couple of iterations before that, so you can go read it. It's pretty much human readable form, right? It's pretty understandable. They have a lot of documentation on there, so it's fun to kind of like read over that. But it will probably, there will be a new version anytime soon. So let's have a quick demo just to all get on the same page of like, what are we doing? What are we looking at here? Is there anyone who's already kind of like okay, I turn it around because I expect most people. Are there people who are not using MCPs right now? Oh, okay. Well, you'll still learn something. That's good. Perfect. So let's pop out of this one. And like I said, we're going to do this in VS Code, right? Because I don't have anything else right here. All right, perfect. So let me know if that's not okay for the more experienced developers there in the back. Yeah, got a thumbs up. Perfect. So, okay, VS Code, right? Should be no surprise. And I already have, like if I open up the chat window right here, whoops, you can see my sessions. And this is what I said, like this is Visual Studio Insiders, right? So that changes like, I think also daily. So do I have the stable one? VS Code. Oh, it searches all my emails. That's nice for on stage. I don't think I have the, no one saw that. We're going to cut that out for the people at home. So I don't think I have the regular one, but it looks a little bit different than what it does today because this was actually a surprise for me last night as well. But this is your chat window, and right now what we can do here is local background cloud, so and cloud and cloud. See, this is my point exactly. Like, what are we doing here? So you can kind of like say where you want to fire this off, right? Do you want to local and inspect all the things that are going on here? Do you want it in a background? I literally don't know what it is. I need to try it. Or fire it off to the cloud and some agentic thing will run there. But the thing here, and this was a separate, this thing wasn't here. This was kind of like the chat mode that said here in text, like agent, ask, whatever. Like this was kind of like the drop down that was here. And then you had a dedicated button here for this tool icon that was here in the chat. So whenever you're like, hey, I cannot figure out what Gerald said, click around a little bit, okay? So here, because it only works on agent mode, right? Because the agent is the only one that kind of like invoke the tools, invoke the things, get all the context. And if I click on that and I zoom out a little bit, you will get this little pop-up thing, and we have some built-in, right? Built-in MCPs, that's just there. And I can do with that, I can do agent, delegate tasks to other agent, edit, so it can edit files, execute terminal commands, read, search to do, steer, kind of like invoke VS Code function, so it can zoom my font, it can go to dark mode, I can, all these kinds of things, and get things from the web, right? So that's kind of like your core basic functionality that you want to have. Okay, what else do we have? I already have a couple installed. The Azure one, like I said, right, it can do all these things, Azure Container Registry operations, AZD, Cosmos, Event Grid, it can do all these things, right? Like is there a number here? I don't know, but there's like a lot because I have 103 tools right here. There is a limit of 128, and then there will come a little exclamation mark saying like, oh, you got so many tools. I'm not sure. It will try to figure out itself which are relevant to what you're trying to do. If you want to help Copilot a little bit, uncheck a couple that you're like, I'm not going to use this throughout the work that I'm doing here, right? And mid session, you can just switch them around and enable them still, right? So that's fine. So the Azure one, the MCP, sorry, the Microsoft Docs one, right? This is a small one, right? We can do that, that's fine. It can get code samples, it can fetch some docs, or it can search some docs. This one is super helpful if you, who is not in the .NET space? Perfect. So if you're in the .NET space, which we all are, we just established that, good job. Then this is super helpful. This is kind of like you have to have this because of the reason that I just mentioned, right? If you're going to be like, hey, I'm going to build my application and it's going to say, hey, I don't know anything about .NET 10. It's going to create everything on .NET 8 or .NET 9 or whatever, make up a bunch of stuff. That's not super helpful, right? So then you can have like in your instructions file or whatever, like you can also have more and more metadata in there that specifies which tools it can use. Just have the Microsoft Learn one in there because then it will always have access to the latest stuff, right? It can read the latest docs, it can pull in the latest features, and it can use that on your application. Okay, and then the GitHub one, like also you probably want to have this if you're on GitHub because there's a lot less in here than I remember, so I'm not sure why or what's going on. But anyway, this can basically do everything on GitHub. open issues, create repositories, create a new gist, I still don't know how to pronounce it, right? All these things, every operation on GitHub you can basically do. So there's all that. So basically, if I just create, let's just quickly show that, if I can figure out my key configuration here on my Mac. Oh, there we go, that one. So let's just do NDC London 2026. I love you, give me greens. Something random, I don't know. There we go. And little trick right here. Do you know about this one? You can do code insiders .-r. Do we know about that one? Pro tip right here. Boom. And it will relaunch Visual Studio with dot, so you can put any folder in there. Dot is the current folder, and then -r is reload the current window. So it will take this instant and open the folder that I was in, right? So if you're going to learn anything today, this might be it. Okay, so now I'm in this folder. You can see that right here, right? So I'm in this folder, and I can say, hey, bring back this one, and I can do git init right here, initialize empty repository. Perfect. So what I can do now is say, just start describing with like, hey, please push this repository up to GitHub, make it private. And it should be able to figure out that it has tools to kind of like do this. You can see it goes quickly. See, first search through the GitHub MCP tools that can help with this. Tool returned, that's not the right tool. This is always the fun thing about demoing with AI. You never know what's going to happen, right? So GitHub create is going to use the GitHub command line actually, because it can figure out the MCP tool. So that's very interesting and great for a demo where you're trying to show MCP. Anyway, so it should be able to figure out with the tools, but otherwise it will come up with another way, right? So it will just do that. But typically it should be able to do that with the MCP server as well. So I also had the Azure one. I'm not sure if I'm logged in there. Can you use, let me be very specific, the Azure MCP tools and show me my subscriptions that I have. All right, let's see if it does that. But like I said, it should come up with, using the Azure MCP tools, need to search for the subscription list tool specifically, running list from the MCP authentication field, right? But at least it found a tool and I can do things, right? So I need to do AZ login, which I'm not going to do because you've already seen my emails. I'm not going to also show me my password, okay? But it should be able to do that. And it will figure out the tools, and typically you don't have to be this explicit with, hey, use the tools, but sometimes if it can't figure out, you have to do a little bit of nudging to get it in the right way. Okay, cool, so now we have that. These are all the models, by the way, but you can click in here, and then you can also go to this little icon, which is the MCP icon, and then you can add your own. We'll see that in a little bit. But also down at the bottom here we have Browse MCP Service, and it takes you to the extensions tabs here on Visual Studio Code, so you can go there manually as well, do Add MCP, and you'll get all the MCPs right here. I think we also have like an MCP registry on GitHub right now. There's a couple of registries out there. This is kind of like curated by us, and you can see you have Context 7, which is pretty good, which is like a global thing that I think scrapes things from the internet. It looks at like LLM metadata and whatever. It indexes all kinds of things, which is super helpful. The GitHub one, oh, I don't have it installed. See, so I think it has a, press enter to confirm my input on what. Okay. So I think it has like a bunch of maybe tools on board these days. The Playwright, right? So you have all these kinds of things from Microsoft and definitely outside of it to use with that. Stripe integrations, right? MongoDB, Sentry, super cool also in my space. So you have all these kinds of things, and it should be like, hey, you can install it with the press of a button here, or you can say install in Workspace, which is also interesting. So you don't have to install it kind of like throughout your whole machine, but you can also install it just for this workspace, right? And whenever you do that, you should see here that it creates this .VS Code folder, and then you have this mcp.json file, which always looks the same. It just depends on where it is in your folder structure to kind of like what extent it's going to be found by your IDE or whatever tool you're running. So servers, this name can be anything, right? This is going to be the name that kind of like shows up here. So right here, you can see the GitHub MCP server, and I got the Microsoft Playwright MCP, right? So that is this name. Type, standard input output. Command is going to run this, some versioning, et cetera, et cetera. So you can install it like that. You can install it like higher up, and it will all just work the same. So that's kind of like in a nutshell how to use this. And this is just in VS Code, and in Visual Studio it pretty much looks the same. But you can also set this up, I think, even with the same kind of like MCP JSON in your Claude desktop. I think you can even configure them in your GitHub web environment, right? You can configure, I think also on the enterprise level, hey, what MCPs are people allowed to use inside of my GitHub organization, right? So you can set it up in a whole bunch of stuff so that you can use that everywhere, or your people can use that anywhere, right? So good. Yeah, I think I'm just going to skip over that here. Made a couple of notes, pushing everything down. Yeah, okay. So let's quickly go over to the slides and dig a little bit deeper. Okay, so we got that. I see this is all messed up because I made this on Windows and now I'm on a Mac, but that's fine. So we got this, right? So we have the MCP client. In this case, that's GitHub Chat, right? GitHub Copilot inside of VS Code, and that invokes the tools. We've seen that. We tried to do something with GitHub. We did something with Azure. It does all these things. You can query for resources, right? If we were logged in, you could see in Azure, like, hey, these are my web apps. These are my virtual machines. You could virtually do anything in there because they made an MCP for that. And it interpolates prompts, right? So it can figure out like what to do with that. And then your MCP server, so in this case, the Azure one, the GitHub one, the Playwright one, whatever you want one, it exposes the tools, but it can also expose resources and prompts. So it's not just tools, it can do other things. We'll see that in a minute. So the tools, they can retrieve search, they can send a message. The resources, they can be files, they can be database records, they can be API responses. Because as we will see whenever we start building it in a minute, this just runs your code. It's just a C# application. You can build it in any other language because we're all .NET people, right? So we established that. But you can do it in any other language if you're feeling adventurous. But it just invokes code, right? The LLM and the client will just figure out like, oh, you're trying to get something from my PostgreSQL database, and I'm just going to query that record and I'm going to give that back to you. And you can write the logic to do that in a C# function, but you just have made that available through an MCP and it will run through there, right? So your question is probably, and I'm not going to go too deep into that, you're probably going to wonder like, how does it work with authentication? We've already seen in the Azure one, you can do it very secure because I can not do anything without logging in. So you can absolutely do something with authentication, right? So there are samples out there that you can watch. Everything with authentication is pretty painful if you ask me, so that's why it's not part of this demo, but you can absolutely figure it out with the help of Copilot, I guess. Right, so you can do all these things here. And then prompts, right, there are kind of like pre-written prompts that might be helpful. You can kind of like pre-package that in your MCP and bundle that as well. And even kind of like parameterize it, so you can say, hey, we are going to ask for a couple of parameters first and take that in and make that part of the prompt that the user can then fire off, and that will kind of like help. All right. So with tools like, hey, this is what we've basically just seen, right? I've already mentioned it a couple of times. You could do everything, right? There's a couple of examples here. Send emails, update to-dos, run tests, and it will just have that little text box there, and it will say like, hey, I found something in the MCP server. I found a tool. Depending on, I'm not sure if this is kind of like the client or the LLM, well, the LLM doesn't do all the thinking. If the client figures out like, hey, this might be a operation that is potentially doing something dangerous, right? It will, it could also ask you like, hey, do you want to allow this, yes or no? And you can say, yes, allow this for once, or allow it for the whole session. If you've worked with GitHub Copilot CLI, you have, whenever you start it, you have Copilot, and then you have a parameter -- YOLO. Love that. We should have more software with a parameter called YOLO. You only live once, for the people who didn't. Yeah, no, okay. So, and that basically means it has access to all the paths on your machine, all the tools that are there. It can do whatever, right? I have yet to see it format my hard drive. That's what happened to my Windows machine. It just hit me. Oh my goodness, no. It can do everything with your machine, right? So it can definitely mess up your machine. It can definitely mess up your environment. So make sure that you kind of like, trust what it does. But it definitely has built-in fail mechanisms where it's like, it's not going to go there without your consent, right? Built into the models with prompts and whatnot. It's going to be careful typically. So you can work with this in a couple of ways, right? We've just seen, hey, you can do that per chat tool selection, right? You can select which ones are loaded, yes or no, for the context for the tooling. You can mention tools and prompts, right? You can also say, hey, hashtag, or maybe in the UK it's more pound, right? Yeah, no? Yeah, you're a hard audience. You can mention them as well, right? So instead of saying like, hey, maybe you can use this MCP server in text, you can also say, pound, use this tool, and then it will know automatically because you explicitly reference that thing. And then you can kind of like inline do user tool sets as well. So you can select tools for like, hey, I'm now going to do tests. And you can predefine kind of like, okay, whenever I am going to talk about tests, I switch on this tool set and it only does playwright and my unit test MCP and not the things about Azure or whatever, right? It doesn't need to go there. Resources, like I mentioned, you can add resources in there as well. So that can be files, that can be documents, it can be image, it can be database schemes. It can be everything you want, basically. Reducing response tokens, right? If you've been working with AI and things, then you'd know besides context, tokens are everything as well, which has to do with context. So you can reduce kind of like the response tokens with all of this by returning that from the MCP. You can put the files in there, right? So you can just see those inline as well. You can download it and it will be provided with there as well. And you can attach it as context, right? So if you have something that's coming from the MCP and you're like, oh, that can be super helpful as context for my end users, then you can put it in there. You have a little add context button. I didn't really press it just now, but you can see like, hey, all the resources that are available exposed through the MCP, and you can add those as context to feed together with your prompt. And then the prompts, of course, we all know that. You can have static presets, right? If you're like, hey, with my MCP, I know that with the model that I've trained, et cetera, this prompt works really, really well, then maybe I'm going to pre-build that one and I'm going to put that in my MCP and provide that to the user just because I know it works really well. Reusable with placeholders, right? As we'll see in a little bit, you can, as I mentioned, parameterize them. So you can ask the user first for input with like, hey, I want to have a random number, and you can ask minimum, maximum, and then it will automatically replace those inside of your prompt. So you will have a pre-built prompt that you can fire off and do things. In this case, not super useful, but there's definitely scenarios where it can be useful, or completely dynamically generated, okay? So here it is, like, hey, for the prompts, like what could be use cases for this? Some of them could be like, hey, welcome setup, right? Whenever you have that onboarding scenario, someone new is starting at your company, let's do a welcome prompt. So you do /welcome, super easy to kind of like onboard and up pages and manuals and whatever, or go through the code and figure it out, or spend a week on our help desk. So, you know, that's always a great excuse, right? Like, oh, you need to spend a week on our support desk and then you'll know exactly how our product works. I hate that. Anyone did that? I did that. No? Just me? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, then you don't know how it is, but I hate it. And need info about a specific issue, or, you know, the things that you can see here. So we have, well, I keep saying we, this is all kind of like kickstarted by Anthropic, right? I already mentioned that. But we, as Microsoft, are the owners of the C# SDK for this. It lives in their repository, but we own that piece of the code and we kind of like release it, I think. We maintain it. But you also have other SDKs, right? Anthropic doesn't care about .NET as much as we do. They care a little bit, we're friends, but they also care about Java and Kotlin and Python and TypeScript and Go and Rust and all the things out there, right? So there's a bunch of official SDKs, not just .NET, whatever code you feel like on a particular Wednesday morning, you can be like, hey, I'm going to pull down that SDK and I'm going to figure out how to make it work with all of that, right? So you can absolutely do that. But we're, of course, in the C# one. And there you have like the clients part as well, where you can fire off things to the client and connect with it that way. But the really interesting part, if you ask me, is in the servers, which you can do in a couple of different things, right? If you We'll see that in a minute, but if you looked at kind of like the MCP.json just now, you could put in a command line thing, right? You can have a local tool. That's kind of like how MCP started. You had to pull down kind of like the binary or maybe even the source code, and you could run it on your own machine. But that doesn't really scale, right? If you want to do something with GitHub or whatever, that's not great. So we now also have hosted MCPs. So the GitHub one and the Microsoft Learn one are just hosted applications with either server-sent events or streamable HTTP. And you can just connect to them with a remote endpoint, and it will just do all the things that an MCP does from there. Again, depending on your use case, you can do all these things, but you can implement all of those with the C# SDK, right? So it has a bunch of NuGet packages that are kind of like the core packages for this. So that's typically the most important one are the model context protocol, model context protocol.ASP.NET Core, whenever you're doing something that is hosted, that's HTTP. And then you have kind of like the model context protocol.core, which really has the core types and core functionality that is the foundation of the both of these. How to get started, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you some Excel code, but just how to get started, like, hey, in the very basics, like if you want to have a local one, you can just do a console application, right? That's still the best project, the best solution that we have in .NET. Console application works everywhere. And you can just do, hey, -n, that's for a name, right? So you can give it a little name, my MCP, add package, so that adds the NuGet package, right? If you're like a Visual Studio user, right-click, manage NuGet packages, model context protocol, that's the way to do it. In the command line, and then the Microsoft extensions hosting, and then, also a little cutoff here, sorry about that. Add the right usings. Oh, there it is. And then you can do, hey, the host builder, the application builder, create that, and then you can just build it up as you would for like your ASP.NET application, for instance. Services, add MCP server with standard I/O, right? That's std.io. std, I think, means something different here, but std.io, server transport, and you can just start with that. And then you have to kind of like register the tools as well. And you can also do register with I'm just going to show you. So, and then you can start writing, right? You can adorn your class with MCP server tool type. Just a little metadata on there. I don't even think it has to be on there, but it's probably good to have it. And then you can start writing your functionality. So you can just say, hey, MCP server tool, description. Description is kind of important, right? Because LLM, large language models, it will figure out based on language what you're trying to do. So the description is pretty important so that it knows like, hey, I want to echo a message. Then it's going to look through its tools. Okay, then this is a tool that fits with that, right? So it's kind of important that you get the description right. And then it will just invoke this method and run your code. If you want to do something else, again, have a good description and it will figure that out automatically. So let's have a look at how all that works. Let's see how I'm doing for time. About 20 minutes left. That's going to be fine. So let's just keep with this one. I'm going to close this one for a little bit. And I'm going to say, well, first, I showed you with like, hey, start a new console application, add those NuGet packages. You can absolutely do that. What you can also do, I probably have it here, .NET new uninstall. So .NET new install, you can install separate template packages, right? And if you just do .NET new uninstall, you would have to specify kind of like the ID of the thing you want to uninstall. If you don't specify that, it's going to give you a list of the templates that you've manually installed. Is it still readable in the back there? Yeah, okay, perfect. And I've installed this one. This is not installed by default at the moment. Maybe at some point it will. But you can just use this one, Microsoft MCP Server Project Templates. And this is just something that lives on NuGet, right? So you can just go out to NuGet as well and find it out there. So whenever you have that, I can now do .NET new MCP Server. There we go. We cannot. Oh, I already made some things. Okay, wait. Okay, I'm just going to do force, that's fine. Force, and it's going to create it. Typically, you don't have to do force, but because there was a README in here already, it's like, hey, this folder's not empty, I'm not going to do this. So now we got a new MCP server, we got it, and we got all these things. Did I already open it here? Yeah, I did. Cool. So let me remove, well, let's keep it, it's fine. And here you can see .mcp. So here we have some metadata, right? Again, like part of the specification. So you can just say, hey, schema, you can have your description for your whole package. You can give it a name, a version, obviously, the packages. You can give it a bunch of metadata for whenever it's published, because this automatically has on board that you are going to publish this as a NuGet package, right? You don't have to, but you can if you want to. And then here we have like the program CS, so that's kind of like your starting point, right? So it has the usings that I've just showed you, maybe even more, dependency injection, hosting logging, create application builder, add console so that we get a little bit of logging output in our console application as well. And then services, add MCP server, which is kind of important, standard input-output server transport with tools. And this is already different than what you saw earlier, right? So you can do with tools from assembly, and then it will just scan the whole assembly. I think you can even put in another assembly in there that it will scan for all the kind of like attributes in there, and it will make an inventory of, hey, these are all the tools that I have inside of this assembly. You can I see random, not random. You can manually register them as well. That's what I wanted to say. By just referencing the class, right? And you can have multiple of these, so I can say, hey, with tools. Another one, time tools, right? It's just making this up right now, but you could do that. And you can do all of those. And whenever you start working with like the prompts and the resources that I just had, it's important to kind of like have those in here as well. So with resources follows the same pattern. You can do with resources, you can do with prompts, and you can register them up all here, right? So let's do that. And then here, this tool, whoops. This tool has like, see, that's why I said like I don't think it's actually necessary to have, whoops, the MCP tool type on here. It's not in the template, so I think it kind of like infers whenever you have this. Like I said, things are moving fast, so I'm not sure. The most important thing is that on a method you have this MCP server tool right here with a description, and in this case it just has a thing in here that says minimum value, maximum value is going to build a random number. It's going to return a random number. Now, what you can do to test this, and this is just mostly a random regular console application, right? So I can just do .NET build, and it will build all the things, right? If we look in the CS proj, there's nothing like .NET 10. It has a bunch of runtime identifiers. You can run it on Linux if that's what you want. You can pack it. It has a package type of MCP server, and we should, of course, have the reference here to model context protocol, right? So we got that in here as well. Build succeeded, perfect. Now, what you can do to kind of like test this is a couple of things. Anthropic also created a inspector for this, so you need to install it through npm, so you can do npm install as a global tool. This is probably a little bit hard to see, right? I'm not sure how to make that better. So it is what it is. And then you could say add model context protocol add inspector. And then it's going to install that. I already have it, so this is probably not going to work. And whenever you have that, you can say npx, right? So you can start running this thing. Add, I should have kept that, model context protocol add inspector. And then after that, you can say what command it should kind of like fire to get this thing started. And I could just say .NET run, which works because I'm in the project folder, right? So it's going to do an error, which is totally expected. Invalid packaging model context protocol. Is that not model context protocol? Oh, I need to do, I'm sorry. I already had the add there, /inspector, there we go. And then it's going to do .NET run on my folder that I'm in, so it's going to run that MCP server that I just created. And you get this little inspector right here, right? Which is just a little web tool, and you can inspect the output here, session token. It's up here, so you can start it manually if that's what you want, but it opens the browser as well. And you can get the standard input-output. Here you can still change the command if that's what you want. Inspect the environment variables, see authentication, you can play with that. And you can say connect. So I click that right now. It's going to take a little while. Oh, actually, it's not too bad. And you can see here in the background all the output that's going on. So you can say, hey, logging, set level, initialize, and this is all part of that model context protocol, right? This is just the standardized protocol that's going on. I can list all the tools, and there it is, get random number, boom. With the description in there, and I can click it so that you can kind of like get a Swagger interface to actually invoke it. So I can say, hey, min, max, it proposes a little value for me, and I can run the tool, and I can inspect what kind of like the outcome is right here, success, and I can inspect the raw output here, and then the terminal output right here if there would be any, right? So you can do it like that, but the more fun way, I think, is to not do this, and close this, and to use it actually in GitHub Copilot chat. So let's start a new one, and I'm not sure why it's saying this. So I can add a new tool like this, right? We've seen, if you press the little icon right here, and you can add a new one, right? So the standard IO, HTTP, or browse, and you can do an npm package or pip package or whatever. But let's do this one. And then I can say command to run. And I can again just do .NET run -- project. Projection? Wow, what are you doing? And I can copy the whole path from here to the project. And it will just invoke that. And you can give it a name, right? Can be anything, that's fine. And you can say global or workspace. Let's do it workspace, that's fun. And here we are. And you can see, like, hey, we have type standard IO, command.net, args, run, project, thing, right? And now it's just going to run this whenever I try to kind of like invoke it. And you can see that we have the little helpers right here. So you can already see like, hey, it's running, you can stop, you can restart, and we have one tool. If it would have prompts or whatever, it would say that too. And now you can start inspecting here, whoops, not this one, what those things are. So I can see my new server right here, my MCP server, et cetera, with get random number. Cool, cool, cool. And now I can say, let's just show off that syntax. I can say use get random number. See, you can see it shows up here. To get a random number between 1 and 1337. Oops, there we go. And now it knows to invoke that tool. You can see the little icon here like, hey, I know to use this tool. It's going to work, and it's going to actually get a random number by invoking the code right here, and it's going to do that. See, and here it says like, hey, MCPs can do funny stuff. So you have to explicitly allow it, or say like, hey, I want to always allow it, always allow this tool, et cetera, et cetera. So it would just do that, and it's going to be like 8:15. Perfect, perfect. So we got that. And then, of course, you can just, you can add all kinds of things in here. So I'm going to do MCP server tool, generates an array of random numbers, et cetera, et cetera. This is just me tabbing through Copilot suggestions here. See, so you can build it out to all kinds of different things. You could, I don't know. Perfect. Okay, so I built another one. I'm going through my time a little bit more quickly than anticipated. So I built another one, which is right here, because I also wanted to show you a little bit about if you might have a existing REST API, and you're like, hey, that's nice, but am I now going to have to build all this functionality again just to expose it through an MCP server? No. Because this just builds on ASP.NET technology, right? So you can fairly easily just add it in here. So what I did here, this is actually by an example of Louise Fries. I don't know if you know her, she's a known speaker as well. And she was like, hey, I'm going to turn myself in an MCP. And I was like, that's a fun idea. But I think she did it in Python and all kinds of other tools. But I was like, okay, I asked Copilot to kind of like, hey, can we do this, but now with C# using the C# SDK with MCPs. And it also generated this API for me. So we have two things right here. This is just another MCP, and it scrapes kind of like from my website all this stuff with like my email, my name, fun, all the talks. I keep a kind of like a list of talks that I did, et cetera, et cetera. So it scraped that, and it saved it into a JSON files, right? So we have a bunch of JSON files with my socials on here, a little bit of bio in here, projects, quotes. It made up the quotes. I don't know where they came from, but that's fun. Skills, right? Talks, all this stuff. Hey, there we are. That's nice. So it has all that. But it didn't just generate this MCP. That's nothing. We know all the things that are here now, right? We know how to deal with these things. But you can see, like, hey, the code can be a little bit more than just console write line, right? It can do all these things. It can serialize, it can deserialize JSON. It can go get things from your database. It can do anything you can do with C# code. So it will now get things from my JSON. It will parse some things, and it will return things with like, hey, location, team, email, right? But it also generated an API to do that. So that kind of like has the same thing, but now with models, with data, but also with these services, right? So they're just like services that you would expect through endpoints, the minimal endpoints, map get health profile, and it will get this information. So what I did is like, hey, I already did it here, but let's see if we can do this here again on stage, which is always extra stress, which is always fun. So the code is for a session and demo about building MCPs. I want to show people how to add MCPs to their existing REST APIs for the Gerald Versluis API, which is my handle everywhere. And the MCP in there, so treat the API as an existing REST API and add the MCP functionality in there, add comments on things that you add to achieve this. Just remove, yes, that's fine. Because I already did this, so now it's like, hey, you want to override what you did previously, and I absolutely want to. Is it able to figure that out? I don't know. Let's try in a new chat. And what it's going to do now is basically only add the bits that we've already seen on how to build an MCP server, right? So it's going to do a couple of things a little bit differently, but in the application builder, it's going to also say like, hey, add MCP server, but now it's going to say with HTTP things, right? Before it said like with standard IO server, but now it's going to say with HTTP endpoints. And we also have to do map MCP, right? So with the map endpoints, we now also get add app map MCP. That's a lot of things in there. See, so this is allow, yeah, I'm just going to allow everything in this session. That's fine. So it's going to go through my API right now, and the first thing it's going to do in my CS proj is add the right reference here, right? And then it's going to add MCP server in the program.cs. So we should see that pop up. And then it's going to map the endpoint, and it's going to, oh, here we go. So add MCP server with HTTP transport, right, with tools from assembly. So it's going to use this same assembly or REST API to scan the assembly for the tools, for the little tool attributes in there. It's going to get that, map MCP, right, so that we get the endpoints that the MCP server expects, that the protocol kind of like dictates that we need to have in there, so that the Copilot CLI, or the Copilot chat in this case, the MCP client knows kind of like where to call. And that's mostly it, except for actually creating the tools, right? So it's going to create the tools again for me. Now, this is not super nice. It would be better if that was reused from this MCP server right here. But, you know, if you're applying this to your existing REST API, then this is something that you should do. And then, of course, this code doesn't need to be duplicated. It can just call into your business logic that you already have, right? To the dependency injection stuff, you can apply that here, and you can go out to your invoice service, whatever, and get the invoice for the thing that you're after, right? So you can do all of this, and whenever we have this, you can now just say, hey, .NET run, you'll get the endpoint, of course, where it's running, where you can access your ASP.NET application, and you can plug that in your MCP configuration and just use that. It will pick up on it. You can do it. Oh, there we go, .NET build, so it's almost thinks it's ready. Except for the build errors, which is fine. So it's going to figure that out. It's going to do things, and then you can start doing that. Oh, it needs the ASP.NET Core. So if we would go to the C# SDK, so this is just the Anthropic repository that we got here. Let's just quickly switch over to that one, which has a couple of samples as well. So if you go to the samples folder, this is like the source for the entire thing, but it also has a samples folder for a couple of different scenarios, right? In the everything server, I wanted to get to that, but I don't have any time, unfortunately. This also has the things for like prompts and resources. So if that's something that you're interested in, then you should have, could look at that. Here you can see like with tools, but also with prompts, right? And the simple prompt type really just returns a simple string, right? It just says this, period. But you can also have a complex one. Let's get this out of the way. Where you can say, hey, we are taking parameters, and then you can put those in your prompt. But by doing chat message, it will still just end up as a draft, basically, in your chat message that the user can still fire off. But this will kind of like help you craft prompts that are helpful with the MCP functionality that you might have here. Let's see if this one is done. .NET build. All right, seems like it did. So let's open this one, API, .NET run. Sensitive files, I don't know what more it wants to do. Okay, so it's running. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's see. So I have Swagger also installed. So this is just your regular REST API, right? With your endpoints, with your things. I can get my profile right here because this is all about me, right? So execute, and we will get Gerald, software engineer, et cetera, et cetera. Perfect. So we can get that, but we can now also use this same URL to go back to, where do we have it? This one. Agent, tools, add a new one, add this HTTP one, and just insert the URL here. Give it another name. Let's name it mine. Also in the workspace, let's do that. And you can see start 9 tools. It already knows it's 9 tools. And this is basically the only thing that you need to do, right? There's definitely more configuration that you can do, but just to get started with a simple endpoint, this is the thing that you can do. So let's start running, okay? It should show up here, not this one. This one, get random number, no. Oh, there it is. Yep, it finds all my tools. Get skills, all right. And I can ask, can you tell me if Gerald did any sessions in 2025? And now it will automatically, based on the descriptions and the things that are in there, let's see if we can just quickly pull that up. Like if we have talks, so this is going to be about talks, right? So let's get this out of the way. It should have like, hey, get Gerald speaking engagement and conference talks, right? And you can filter on year, and I will get the response from a JSON file, right? And it will append that all here. And you can see it picked up on the get talks method right here. It's going to specify that year 2025. It's going to allow, and it will run that. It will get it from the MCP server, the running MCP server. I can debug that if I want. I can put in a breakpoint. I can walk through that. And you can see, hey, highlights, Microsoft build, NDC London, yay. I've tried Tekorama and some other things, right? It's not about that. So it can get the information about me, right? So I turned myself into an MCP server. So, you know, you can do all kinds of different cool things with all of this. I wanted to show you more, but I talked too much in the beginning. So here we are. So let me quickly wrap this up so you can go to some coffee. Hopefully I'm going to some coffee. Should you actually still be building an MCP server? Well, that is the question, right? Like, we're all in agreement that this is really cool what I've just shown you here, right? Yes, finally. All right. Normally it's applause, but I'll settle for this one. Now, with all the things that came out between me submitting this talk and where we are now, maybe you've heard about like agent skills, right? That's a new thing. And skills and prompts and custom agents, they're all just markdown files, right? But in the models, it's kind of like built in that they know how to work with a skill now. And it's probably a little bit more complicated than that, but they know how to work with skills. And skills, if you look into that, it's a markdown file with a little bit of metadata that says you can use these tools, also a description, and then some, you know, human readable instruction about like, okay, you are a tester. No, this is too much. This is more custom agent. And that's kind of like where this is wrong. It's all kind of like different markdown files with a slightly different angle, right? So custom agent, you're going to describe a persona more, like, hey, you're a tester on our team and you're going to focus on this and that is important. Definitely don't do that. And for a skill, you're going to say, you can run unit tests this way in our repository, right? So a skill is like a unit test maybe, like it does the one thing very well. which can also be an MCP server, right? You can have a couple of skills that would typically make up your NCP server. So, you know, should it be an MCP server? It's a lot of kind of like ceremony and things and hosting and stuff that you might not need, and you can get away with it if you just put a skill in your repository, right? So if you want to build something, if you're running a software as a service, and you're like, I want to expose things through an MCP server, absolutely go for it. That's probably the right way. If you're like, I want to automate things in my code base, only my code base, you probably can get away with like custom agents and skills and that kind of thing, right? So there's that. What's next? The spec is evolving fast, right? Like stuff that I've told you right now might be outdated next week. That's how it goes. VS Code is on top of it though. VS, Visual Studio proper, is a little bit behind typically. Visual Studio Code is going way fast. Like they have the insider that releases daily. And they were one of the first that implemented like the full spec, the full everything, and they are on top of that, keeping up with that. So everything that will be refined in the spec, they are doing that. Hot of the press, like yesterday, what is it, 28? So the day before yesterday, MCP apps support, right? So now you can build full MCP apps, which means that they can have UI, right? So right now it's all text, and you can return kind of like text messages and have to do things in JSON and Markdown. Now what you can do is like return these full flame graphs and whatnot, all kinds of UI elements inside of the client that you use to interact with the MCP. So this is part of the spec now as well. Visual Studio Code implemented it, and you can use that today, probably in Insiders. So stuff is moving fast. Oh, I totally forgot to add resources here. So don't take a picture of this slide. In all the confusion between machines, I totally forgot to fill this. So if there's anything, if you're like, hey, what was the link for this thing? Please find me. I think my contacts are here. So take an image of this. I can be on here if you want. Oh, this is cool. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of NDC London.